Hello, everyone. I'm Stacy Sherman from Doing CX Right, and today is a special day as I am the featured host of CX QA Live. And I am here today live from Las Vegas, CCW, focusing on the women's event yesterday to bring you the highlights in case you weren't here. And if you are here, you're going to also still benefit from some of the conversations that I'm having with the wonderful Dr. Hui. And let's get started, Dr. Hui-Curtis, I should say. And let's get started on some of the things that we learned about yesterday's event. I'm going to look at you rather than the audience because then it feels more personal.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yesterday we were in the room all day, jam-packed event.
Right.
What were some of the highlights, some of the takeaways that you remember?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of very memorable moments, but I think, majority of the kind of women leaders, they were sharing their incredible stories and backgrounds. And I think it showed us the power of resiliency, the power of support. And some of the kind of key takeaways that I've had is one, like we have to have time for ourselves. So mental health is a huge issue because we're always so busy doing so many other things. Establishing healthy boundaries. So being able to kind of say no to certain things because we tend to take on too much. And learning to be able to ask for help. Key. Because it takes a community and it takes several. I mean, it's always so great to have mentors and mentees around that you don't have to have all the answers sometimes.
No. And why is it so difficult to ask for help? I mean, it's almost funny that we're saying that.
Yeah.
The idea of delegating, the idea of saying, I can't do it all. Why do women especially, and I'm sure men go through this too.
Absolutely.
But why is this even a topic?
I think it's the dynamics of women, right? I mean, we feel like there's only so many certain spots at the top and we're all fighting for it, which sometimes it's not true. And so I think it's hard for us to ask for help because one, it shows kind of a sign of vulnerability and weakness. And we always want to achieve. We want to be seen as the one that is next in line for that promotion, next in line for that VP position. And so it's just easier for us to try to figure it out and do it our own instead of ask for help.
All right, so I'm going to go a little sensitive here.
Okay,
all
sure.
Right? You just said that there's only a certain amount of seats at the top.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
What's your view? Have women been supporting women enough? Because it's limited.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm going to say no. I think when you really look at it, I mean, I think things are changing and we're seeing more women at the top. But in terms of looking at it in a pay forward kind of perspective, right? So when you're in a position of power, how often do you say, okay, now I'm going to work with other women to kind of help them crack the door open and give them opportunities that they normally wouldn't have? You just don't see enough of that going on.
No.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say something that troubles me to say this, but I'm keeping it real on CXQA Live. And that is, over my 25 years in a corporate career, I've had men and women. And it pains me to say truthfully that a majority, not all, majority of men were more supportive. And I think that we need to have that conversation as my bosses, I'm saying.
Yeah.
To be able to level the playing ground and have more women realize that there is plenty of room up there, and to ask for help and for self-care.
Right.
And so now, next generation, we are both moms.
Right.
We're both working moms.
Right.
So what do you tell your children, male and female? How do we make the shift happen for it to be different in the future?
Yeah, I think it's being able to kind of articulate to our kids, right? I mean, if you were to ask my kids today, I don't think they know what I do.
Yes.
Like, I know mom goes to work and she comes home. But I think having conversations and educating them and bringing awareness to how important these things are, right? Like my boys, like I want to be able to teach them that you have to be allies. Yeah. You have to be able to support women. This is why it's important. I appreciate all of their girlfriends. And so I want to make sure that my boys are raised the right way, whether it be their personal life or in corporate life, and understanding that there are always going to be inequities in the workplace, right?
Do you think we'll ever get to a place where it's not women leaders, men leaders. There's just leaders. Do you think that'll be our lifetime?
I would like to think so. But I think it takes each of us, right? It's not going to change overnight, and I think it'll be incremental.
Yes.
But there's already so many things that's happened within our lifetime that I thought would never happen.
Like what?
So I'm optimistic about that. I mean, just the fact of having an African American president. Nobody would have ever have fathomed that. I live in the state of Arizona. We just flipped parties. I never thought that would have happened.
Yeah.
And so it's always interesting in terms of dynamics and the awareness and the slow changes that are happening really kind of around us. So why shouldn't it kind of bleed into the corporate life? And so I think you're seeing more companies being very intentional and very conscientious about how they go about, the entire equity and diversity piece.
I think we also, as a mom, both inspire our sons and our daughters through role modeling.
Absolutely.
Right? We teach by doing, not just talking.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think when they see us in the workplace, right, and they also encounter folks that I work with, they kind of hear and see a different side of their mother.
Yeah.
It's the work mom.
Yes.
Right. And so they think you might be goofy or you don't know how to work the remote control or whatever it is. And then inside the workplace, you have like a certain, I would say, air about you, right? Certain professionalism. People respect you. They like working with you. And so they're not going to see that side of mom at home. So it's always great to kind of expose them to kind of that workplace.
All right, so I'm going to shift it for a minute.
Okay.
Still with what we've learned at CCW Women and our own experiences. We're both in the customer experience, customer service space.
Yes.
You are focused on BPO,
Mm-hmm.
and I just came from a BPO and from the client side and the vendor side. And where does women and in the customer experience field, where's the link? What's changed, or what are the opportunities?
Yeah, I think it's, everything kind of happens in a pendulum, right? And it's always about, for decades, it was about customer experience. How do we supply the best customer experience? Those are the companies that are really going to be ahead of the game and increase revenue and have longevity. Now the pendulum has swung to employee experience. Now we're having an internal focus, right? And so I think there's so many great technologies out there to help augment the work. And sometimes people feel that this technology will replace the work because, let's face it, contact centers are expensive to operate, right?
Yeah.
And they've always served as a huge operating expense. But now it's a matter of how do we bring back the humanity inside of CX, inside of the contact center space? Because if we don't treat them with human connections, how are they going to translate that into serving our customers, right? And so I think there's a huge opportunity, and I'm going to generalize this, but I think women leaders tend to do that better. They're very conscientious about the human elements of their staff. They do a really good job in terms of motivating, understanding, and being very cognizant of items that are outside of the workplace, right? We're mothers, we're caretakers, we're siblings. And so understanding, kind of seeing those needs, you definitely see, not everybody, but I generally definitely see that from more of my female leaders.
Over dinner, you and I talked about impact sourcing.
Yes.
Tell everyone a little bit about what that is and what are the opportunities that you see going forward with customer experience and impact sourcing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Support U is all about impact sourcing, and what it really is having a very deliberate and intentional mission to be able to kind of help provide employment opportunities and assistance to folks that are in the underserved populations, groups that have been in the past marginalized and haven't given kind of the same opportunities. So folks like ones that have been released from prison, right? Single parents, military spouses, people of an older age group, minorities, refugees. It just runs the gamut. And so it's those populations that tend to have a more difficult time in the employment space because they're often kind of overlooked because they're not seen as the right people to put in certain trainings or the right people to get promoted because they don't look the part, they don't act the part, they don't have the right credentials. And so it's organizations that have committed themselves to impact sourcing is being very deliberate in terms of hiring, I'm going to say, this alternative workforce, and making sure that we help provide and develop and support them and give them the resources to be successful.
I love the purpose. I love the opportunity to do goodness.
Yeah.
And companies like yours and others who are not just talking about it, as I say, doing CX right, doing impact sourcing right. And it's not really, it's not a gender thing now.
No, it's not.
Right? It's all we have. We have a heart, we have veins, we have a brain, we're people. And so how do people help people regardless of any sort of preference in how you look, how you act, how you be?
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
And we need to create more of those conversations. And hopefully, not only are companies hiring people impacted, but hopefully more people who are impacted show up. And so what you talked about as we are with CCW women and how we need to show up and self-care, that really applies to everybody. It is not gender.
No, it really isn't. And I think there's items that we kind of take for granted, right? And so I've had folks of different backgrounds, and I'll give you an example. We had several leaders that were, one leader in particular, she was really grossly overweight, right? But nobody ever kind of took her seriously, even though she was like the most knowledgeable, the most talented out of the group. Nobody ever really considered her as kind of a viable leader in the space. And so there's still a lot of biases, but we need to do a better job in terms of featuring and educating people on our own internal biases and really kind of training people to be a bit more open and seeing kind of the broader view of folks. They don't need a hand up. We need to be able to kind of lift them and provide them with the right resources, and then they do the rest.
Training.
Oh, wow. Sure.
That could be a full hour.
Yeah.
So you just said training within companies around all these topics.
Right.
Is it done enough? And how can they, if someone's listening, how can they actually begin to be that company known for their training in the right way?
Right. I think there's so many organizations that have like spectacular training, right? But I always feel like it's very one way. You go and you do the training and that's it. And so I think you have to look at it full circle. If you do the training, you have to apply it. And as leaders, we have to be able to hold people accountable to practicing the things that they've learned in training and making them equally aware of how it really kind of applies to their daily workforce. So and I'll give you another example. There was a gentleman in a particular meeting, and he had a hard time articulating his ideas, even though we had just talked and he gave me great feedback for this particular vendor. And it was because in that environment, he was trying so hard to use big words, right? Just sound really educated, because that was the makeup of the room. And afterwards we talked, we're like, just be yourself. You have great ideas, but just be yourself. And so also educating the folks that are within that space, the impacted space, that they're given a safe space to practice. They're given a safe space to be themselves. And their ideas and their opinions are just as valuable.
Yes. Is there a story that stands out in your lifetime where it makes you passionate to train, to educate? Did something happen to you that's your passion around this?
Well, I would say, we always have events in our lives that kind of have shaped us, right?
Yes.
And I remember one time where I was really interested in moving into a supervisor position. And I remember vividly my manager saying, "Oh, wait, that's cute. Your book's smart, but I don't see that." And so it really kind of put fire under me in terms of just that generalization, right? And so I just worked really, really hard to continue to get promoted and be in positions of influence. So then I know that I can change those types of behaviors, situations for my own employees. And so then as I continue to move up, really it was my opportunity to kind of open the doors for other people. And so it was fascinating to see that people oftentimes didn't have role models that looked like me. And so in a lot of corporations, I was oftentimes the only female, the only minority. And so people sought me for mentoring, and there's plenty of great people. So I'm like, why me? Because
why not you?
Well, why not? But they're like, we don't see a lot of women minorities at the leadership level. And we see things differently. We have our own challenges that I don't think our counterparts would understand.
Is it because people are afraid to have the uncomfortable conversations? Is this fear-based? What's your view?
I don't know if it's fear-based, but I think, everybody to a certain extent lacks confidence. And so regardless of the level of organization, I mean, how often would a representative on the phones feel comfortable talking to their management, right? About, I don't feel like I'm getting these opportunities. That just doesn't happen.
It's hard. It's hard conversations. And I think yesterday, the women in the room were really enforcing that we need to be uncomfortable and just pass through it.
Right.
It's okay to be uncomfortable.
Right.
To ask for that pay or for that leadership role or for that new whatever. Like let's feel it and move through it.
Right. And then I think as leaders, we need to be able to kind of go back to training, right? Training people on how to use those resources in the right ways. What is a good way of starting those conversations with your leaders or with other people within the organization? And then creating a safe space to say, okay, let's practice this. Let's try this, right? And then really kind of showcasing our own, like, we've shared things that really kind of gave us insight, and then that kind of opens the trust, and it opens really kind of the evolution of progress.
You just said the magic word, trust. I mean, trust. Without trust, there's nothing. There is no customer. There is no company. There is no family. There's nothing.
Sure.
And so I think that's really a key takeaway is every day ask yourselves, what am I doing? How are people talking about me when I'm not in the room? Am I trusted? Am I a trusted source? Right? So I think as women, as men, as human beings, focus on that intentionally every day.
Right. Absolutely. I think there are definitely stigmas in the CX field in the contact center space, right?
Yeah.
It's not something we studied in college and plan on doing. We all kind of fell into it. But then once you're in it, you love it because of the impact that it has. Where else can you work with hundreds and thousands of people that impact so many different lives? And typically call centers are like the most diverse departments. And so I find it an incredible gift to be able to kind of pay it forward and give back. But we ourselves within this industry have to educate others on that you can have an effective career in the contact center space. And look at all the great things and all the people that you touch, because oftentimes that's the first point of contact for consumers when they reach companies, right?
Yes. Yeah. So you said the conversations. I want people to understand it's not just the formal programs, the formal training. It's the everyday conversations. And let me give you an example. Okay. In my life, I remember working in a company and I was the only woman in the room. And the guys were talking locker room and I was cool with that. And then they cursed and then they said, oh wait, sorry, Stacy, sorry. Now I was more bothered by them saying sorry than by cursing. I'm like, you should come to my house. You would be like, there's cursing all around.
Right.
But so that's the thing. We need to stop, either don't say it in the room, but not because I'm the woman in the room. Right. And so I want people to remember the everyday conversations. It's not just the formal training. It's the consciousness of, if you're going to say something and then apologize for it, then just don't say it.
Right.
Or include me and let's laugh together. Does that resonate for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in those scenarios, I think it's like nuggets of wisdom, right? Like even if it's passing somebody by in the hallway and having a little chit chat and stuff, I always learn something about people, and they eventually really kind of see me in kind of a different light, right? Not the leader way or not the mom way, but just really kind of interacting. And majority of the time when I introduce myself, nobody even knows what I do in the company, right? They just know we have great conversations over lunch. I chit chat with them, and it's amazing what you're able to kind of find out. And I think those are just as important as the formal meetings.
So for you and your family growing up, did you have parents or grandparents who were your role models in being who you are today? Did you have that model, or did you need to create that in your family?
Yeah, I would say growing up, I came from a very traditional Asian culture. So it was always really male. So my father was the caretaker. He was the breadwinner. I had a brother, and it was like things that were going to be passed down to him. And so the daughters of the family, we were never seen as strong individuals, nor folks that would be in good leadership positions. And so I think we've had to pave our own path. I wasn't born here, but I do have a sister that's first generation here, and we just see things differently. And we've just had to really kind of pave our own way. Now, it wasn't always light, especially my mother, because she was always very traditional, right? That you go and you serve. And so when we have these conversations about sharing our opinions and advocating for certain things, she just gets so embarrassed, because women shouldn't do that. That should be your place. Don't create any ripple effect or any of that stuff. So it was very different in terms of the disparity of our culture and growing up.
Yeah.
And then what did we need to learn and be in corporate to be successful?
The word embarrassed, that I bet a lot of people listening have felt that, feel that, because they feel like the imposter, as they talked about yesterday.
Yeah.
And so you feel embarrassed because you don't really feel it, but you're trying to walk that talk. So what lesson do you have for those that feel that way, feel embarrassed, feel like they're faking it till they maybe make it? Like,
right.
You if you didn't have those teachers, to model after, how did you do it? How did you push through?
I think the biggest teacher is mistakes, right? And so I always tell myself I'm a huge overachiever of mistakes. So I made a tremendous amount of mistakes early on. And I take those moments to really kind of build on, this, like to be a better leader, a better parent. And so we take those building blocks. And so I've always seen as mistakes as huge opportunities for growth. And so coming in, creating a really safe environment for people to make mistakes and to try things. And people also need to understand that it's being vulnerable, it's being genuine, but that's the only way you're going to really self-reflect where exactly you are within your life and your career and where you want to be and what you need to do to get there.
Okay, I want to highlight this. Mistakes are your biggest teacher. All right? I mean, we can keep repeating that because that is gold. That is your takeaway today, if nothing more. I come from the complete opposite, which is really a cool conversation here.
It is, yeah.
Because I grew up from a divorced family, and my mother is one of the first women on Wall Street.
No.
So I used to go there as a kid to Wall Street, and I would see my mom among all the men, but I did not understand then that she was a change agent.
Yeah.
I had no clue what I know now. And so whether you come from a background where you didn't have the models and you had to create your path and learn from the mistakes, or you come from a family that had the model, and my grandparents were also ahead of their times, and I too am learning from my mistakes. So either scenario, that really is the key takeaway, no matter where you come from.
Right, regardless.
Is there anything last around yesterday's event, CCW Women, and some of the stories and speakers in the room? Was there something that you didn't know or that made you think differently?
Yeah, I'm always, there's so many great experts and topics within CC Women. And I think I'm always delightfully surprised when people share their stories. They share things that are quite intimate, right? And I'm always amazed at how much people do open up in a very large room and immediately very trusting of this group that we've just literally met in a day, right?
Yes.
But hearing their story of adversity and resilience and grit and what they did and what we know or how we know them to be today is incredibly powerful. And so I think that shows us the ability to be genuine and vulnerable, but also using those elements as teaching moments for other women. And so I think I was incredibly grateful that so many of them shared, pretty personal and sensitive stories.
Yeah.
And it made me really appreciate their background.
And being vulnerable, I think that is also a key takeaway in the workplace, where leaders can share their personal life and not just be the stoic, leader that they have to prove something,
Right.
but bring your heart, bring your humanness to the workplace, because people will respect you. And when you wake up tired and your team's looking for you to be that model, and you know what, I need that coffee today.
Right.
I was up late last night. It's okay, because people will understand you're human. But when we guard that, that's where the problem happens.
It absolutely does, right? Because they see things as we just have to be on it and we're perfect all the time, Stacy, right? We can do no wrong. We're always on point. We're always smart. We always have the answers. And that's just simply not true. I think we do better at faking it, right? In some mornings, but telling people and understanding, that, there are a lot of challenges and there are a lot of trade-offs. The higher up you move within organizations, and the higher you move up, there's not a training manual for what you and I do, right?
No.
We just kind of had to figure it out. And so I think the more support that we have in place and the more openness that you bring forth, like, I don't know how to do this, right? I built a huge network and I love everybody within my network, and I don't hesitate one bit to call on anybody. And they're so incredibly supportive. And so I think it really does help, because we don't have all the answers. You don't need to have all the answers.
Yeah. I want to applaud you also for what you just said, and you did it for me. I called you. I had a job shift. I didn't know you. I met you for a hot second in a hotel lobby in last year. And yet I reached out to you and I said, here's what's my situation. I'm figuring out how do I want to go forward? And you gave me your time, and we talked. And then we ironically learned that we were going to be in Glasgow together. Right. And then CCW. So that was all ironic and meant to be. But I want to just say that you're not just saying it. You actually did it for me. And that's where we can keep paying it forward.
Absolutely.
So thank you to me, for me, from me, and all the other people that you touch. And I hope that people listening will really take the lessons. This is real. This is not checking boxes, and create the culture in your company and out. And thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to have a Q&A from this session. So join us in the room, and please feel free to reach out directly to us if you want to have the conversation tomorrow, later, next year, next month. We want to keep it forward, keep it real, keep the dialogue going. So thank you.